Okay, it is March 27th, 2025 at 5:02 p.m. We're going to start this subcommittee meeting on policy and management. I'll call this meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I know Kim's not here, but we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a flag this time? Oh, yes. Okay. Let's right hand over our heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Do you have any public comments? So this meeting, we're going to review the cell phone policy. I don't know if Dr. Sahagin, you want to lead us on that? I'm not too familiar with this one. Well, okay, just started, Mr. Paul. What's going on?
Well, as far as policy 5131.8, of course, I'll defer to my wonderful team, and Dr. Chamberlain, in working with the principals, kind of trying to preface, policy, working with the principals, discussing cell phone use on their campuses, primarily secondary, right? High Desert as well as Vasquez, could be problematic universally, not just for our district and secondary students, but for all secondary students as far as, potential disengagement in classrooms. So, heightened language for mobile communication devices, new policies that will take effect starting next year, where we're looking to get ahead of, policy and enact policy on our campuses when applicable. So with that, I'll turn it over to both Jackie and to Paula as far as, this policy, some of the updates, how would it pertain to us? And then within our immediate team, what measures we're taking and what discussions we're having in collaboration with our principals in terms of, adhering to the new policy ahead of time for fall of 25 potentially, in terms of mitigating some of that disengagement that could come along with cell phone use by our students.
Thank you, Dr. Sahagin. So CSBA came up with a new policy proposal. They just did it March 1st of 25. And one of the big things is they're offering two options for the districts to adopt as far as how we're going to do our cell phone policy. So option one is students may use smartphones or other mobile communication devices on campus during non-instructional time, as long as the device is utilized in accordance with law and any applicable school rules. So they could use it when they're outside of the classroom. Option two is students shall not use smartphones or mobile communications devices while at school site or under the supervision and control of a district employee. So they would not be allowed to use the phones at all. The exception to both options is if there's a student that for a medical reason needs to have that phone because it monitors their health, that's different. So that's the exception to both options. So the question becomes, which option do we feel would be best for the students?
This is our old policy, right? This is our 5131. This was in 2005. That's revised 22. The one that's on the one that's on
That's
the
there
site
now?
you showed me. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You've been using that?
Yeah, I was going over it
Practicing,
last night and see what some of the differences were.
Mm-hmm. This though, AB, we do have to pick something because this will go into effect for next school year. I will tell you just as an update, High Desert already does option 2, Vasquez does option 1. So those are already in place. And the focus from the state was on student health because kids being on their phone a lot, it just distracts them from school, but just being on that many numbers of hours, now research is showing that's not healthy for students. So that's been the main reason, and there's a lot of research that supports that. Los Angeles County or Los Angeles Unified School District had a pretty good comprehensive presentation that they did that I would do. But if the board's interested, at a later time, I would share more. But that's the preface or the premise for bringing forth this new bill that was passed.
So tell me, what this looks like at the different schools and what kind of kickback we're getting from students and parents.
Well, High Desert's actually had this in this, the option one, the more restrictive, option two, the more restrictive. As long as Miss Van Arn's been there, it may have been prior to that. I discovered that a couple of years ago, and when the teachers wanted to do something similar, it seemed like a pretty easy kind of transition because the 8th graders coming into high school already can't use them. So, but we did still continue to allow students to use the phones during like passing, during nutrition, and during lunchtime.
And that's at High Desert as well?
High Desert, not at all. They don't allow them to use them at lunchtime. They don't allow them to use them. They don't allow students to use their phones at all. So if you're on campus and you have your phone out, they're gonna either give you the initial warning, it's progressive discipline, right? And then I don't know if they do 1 or 2, but they give you a warning, and then at some point they will confiscate it and give it to you at the end of the school day. And they document, so we counsel you, if that doesn't work, then they call parents and have parents pick it up.
So
They haven't had a lot of pushback from parents on that. We've never had a call, I have never had a call at the district office related to that.
okay, so there hasn't been a parent saying, look, this is ridiculous, this is my right, this is modern times. Because in my world, I would have been at High Desert in 1972. I would not have gone up and went out in the hallway and called someone on the payphone or went in the principal's office and just, picked up my phone, hey dude, so I can relate to the idea behind it. So you're not aware of any challenges to this that someone has actually said, hey, you know what, my rights have been violated.
No.
So what does this look like in the high school now?
So with the high school, the kids are pretty good about it. We don't get a lot of parent pushback. In the beginning when we first did it, and that was 2 years ago, it was more our staff not having boundaries as far as let's be consistent on the rules. We're not taking phones, we're not going into your backpacks, we're not making you, because the idea was what teachers wanted to do was have kids put them in pockets, which in the classrooms, which the school provided, and some teachers do that and it goes really well. Other teachers allowed students to keep them in the backpack. So we had to really clarify as leaders on the campus that, kids can keep them in their backpack, they can keep them on their person as long as they don't have them out. That has gone pretty well. We don't get complaints about it. Kids are for the most part compliant. We do still allow them, or at this point, they still are allowed to have them at lunchtime and nutrition.
Okay, couple things. Kids that are using support devices that aren't specifically, what I'm thinking of is a communication aid. So someone could actually be using a cell phone to talk. Is there any of that going on?
Not that I'm aware of, however, I'm not aware of, like, we do have some students with special needs that sometimes do have devices, and under the law, they're allowed to have devices. They're also, so if their IEP, if it's written into their IEP, then there would be that exception. There also is an exception in the event of an emergency. So if there was an emergency at school campus, you cannot deny a student their right to their phone.
So when the phones are collected, if there was something going on outside, the phones are remaining in the room. There is no collection of the phones at the beginning of the day and then at the end of the day.
At this point, there's not. There has been some discussion of using yonder packets, which the kids would still have them, but they wouldn't have the access to open them. In an emergency though, they could be allowed to open them because the access is on campus. They like have access keys in the classroom. I think it's magnetic. I haven't used them, but I saw the key.
It's a pouch. LAUSD has implemented those, and we just had a vendor meeting, and they demonstrated yonder and how it's actually implemented. you know, like, it's a pouch the kids will put in their cell phone in the pouch for the day. And then there's a magnet, let's say in the classroom, or magnets that, let's say at the exits, and then we'll go ahead and just open that, pouch up and then have access after dismissal. So, I mean, we're looking into that as well. It's just preliminary discussions of how to actually safely store your cell phones.
Let me ask you this, I've seen some kids react to their phone being taken away, almost like they've lost a person or something like that. So can anybody explain to me the psychological or the behavioral issues at play behind that kind of reaction? Sure, there's something on the phone that shouldn't be there.
Right.
There's gonna be something discovered, somebody doesn't, but I've seen this and it's almost like a withdrawal or am I just,
More kids get attached.
Yeah.
They do get it.
And
And
I-
again, go ahead.
Sorry, I was
No,
gonna say, I like your term of it's almost like a withdrawal, because really, if they're so used to having it and having access to it 24/7, that it's like they're almost missing a limb if they don't have it with them. Where if we go with, for example, what we were looking into yonder, they don't have the access, but it's not like they're losing their phone, they still have it in their backpack.
Mhm.
And again, in an emergency, they can unlock it, pull it out.
from a behavioral standpoint, do you think these policies help avoid that kind of, because I would almost describe it as addiction. If
I think it has been described that, like when I mentioned the research, there's a lot of research that there's enough research now that the state stepped in and created this bill and it was approved. And a lot of it is based on research that you're alluding to. So what they're finding is when kids are off their phones, they're healthier, they're more engaged with people. There's less behaviors, there's less bullying, because there's a lot of bullying, unfortunately, being done on social media. And kids are partaking in that during school. I mean, you'll see kids on their phones in groups looking at stuff, and we can't be like always, right up there in their business. I mean, that would be not really respectful of our students.
Paul, as an educator, how long, do you know of any patterns that say a first grader's gonna come in the room and I'm gonna spend the first X minutes trying to get them to sit down and get ready to learn? And is there something that says that gets better on its own as kids get older?
Well, most of the research supports teaching kids routines at all ages and reteaching kids routines during the school year. I mean, even ourselves, we have to self-manage our routines as well. So does it come intuitively for some kids, but the majority, no, it needs to be reinforced. That's what I would say.
And that's part of the first 2 weeks of school, where you're teaching the kids the routines and what the expectation is. And like you said, every once in a while, you have to refresh their memory.
So when it all comes down to it, and inappropriate things and just not following rules and stuff, is the nature of this really to support maximize focused learning in the classroom?
Yes,
This is not a security big brother thing.
no,
So tell me what protections are in place, whether the phone is in the person's hand or not, for people to do inappropriate searches and pull up inappropriate things on the phone in the district. Is there anything in place that would stop that?
Not on your own personal device.
Okay. So the way to assure it is to make sure that there's not access to the phones during learning time.
Correct.
Does staff feel that a more restrictive approach at high school is warranted? In other words, the behaviors we're seeing, I'm supposing that there's uniformity in the staff approach to what the policy is.
Majority of staff would prefer students didn't have their phones out. And when we started doing that at Vasquez, the staff that was consistent reported kids were much more engaged. As it relates to during lunchtime, I would say from a behavior standpoint, sometimes, phones have been used so much with social media and fighting that sometimes fights get instigated because now I can film you and it becomes a thing. And So in incidents where we have had like mutual combat, where there was no filming, it was at a much lower level of even like harm. Like the fight wasn't even as bad, where sometimes where there's been, where I'm videotaping you and pretty soon we get you separated and all of a sudden someone else is doing it because someone has a phone and they're kind of egging you on. And then that person actually sometimes gets suspended too, because now they're causing it. I forget what the word is in ed code, but it's actually suspendable. So in that way, not having phones at lunchtime probably would be a benefit.
Heightened situation.
Yes.
So it becomes more about the footage than the confrontation.
Yeah, I think the
Some-
footage.
And the
sometimes
actions to
worse.
aggravate the actual fight itself. I know in my line of work, people want attention, and the way to get that, of course, through social media and all kinds of stuff, so that I can see that happening a lot.
Well, it does, and we've had situations where we had an incident that happened pretty quickly in a classroom, they didn't have their phones. And so, it ended up being a very minimal, it was a little more than a scuffle, we called that more of a fight, like, actually don't think it was a fight, the one person said something very inappropriate, and the other student was upset and hit the kid that called him a name. But it ended right there, where a lot of times when there's phones, it escalates.
I think my question is best for the chair, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you see anything coming where it says, if you are filming a fight and broadcasting it, that there's going to be some level of penalty for you?
There is, right? Which you mentioned, I think already there is some type of penalty for that. I know there is for posting something like that, a fight. I'm not sure.
For us, there's not.
There's not?
For you, there may be.
Right, I think I've seen it where, I haven't dealt with it myself, but I think I've seen there is some type of charge or criminal misconduct to do that. I think that it came down with the bullying, all the bullying acts that came down, something like that, but I would have to look into that.
So if I were to call law enforcement in support on a fight and say that I learned about it, or it was being generated throughout the community and there was something that was egregious, the fighting is egregious, and I asked for your support in your investigation, it would strike me that the first thing you'd ask for is, does the policy encourage this type of thing?
I don't think that would be one of the questions.
Okay.
I would ask.
Okay, all right. Thank you, I'm good.
Sorry,
Real quick, you mentioned the IEP, some students with IEPs may be able to have their cell phones. How will that be viewed to other students that say, hey, this person has a cell phone out, you're not doing anything? Now are they inclined to say, hey, well, you're putting the kid on the spot? No, it's because I have certain conditions. I don't know how many do we actually
I
deal
don't
with?
think we have any at
Okay.
all, and that's probably pretty rare. I've never seen that accommodation in an IEP, but it could happen.
Mhm.
But with that said, students are aware that some students have the options to take a break from class. They even, sometimes I might not leave the class, but my accommodation would be that I can take a break inside class. Kids know that. I will say at the same time, most teachers accommodate that for all students, not only for students with special needs. If you need a break, take a break. So a phone would definitely probably be different because it wouldn't be extended. We don't have any students that have, I've never really actually heard that asked for, but they would have their right if it was in there.
Are we looking at one policy for all schools, or each school is gonna be
it would be
able to
the
choose
same.
their option?
It would
Well,
It'd be the
same.
same. So which one was, I think Vasquez is the number 1, right, correct? So if we were to adopt one of these, then one of the schools is gonna have to change. What about Meadowlark?
It's not really an issue at elementary school, which is kind of nice.
The kids they're
Even
scared, they
kids that
because they have
have
phones, I
phones,
know.
Some of them do,
Right.
not as many, but they don't get them
yeah,
out.
they're in their backpacks.
The only thing that I would like to balance is the need for parents to communicate. Whether that's, you can't be on your phone looking at videos on this option 1, or you can't be calling people, but a chance to say, hey, do I got a text from my parents? Okay, no, put it away. Now, if you see somebody just using it, in violation of whatever policy we create, that'd be something different, but I do like the fact that I can send my daughter a message and say, hey, I'm running late or something's happening, you know, or whatever it may be, that she can look at it during her break and say, oh, okay, and I put my phone away, you know, I mean, we're advancing in technology, we didn't have, I didn't have a phone when I was in school, my mom used to give me a secret code, if someone else was picking me up, they didn't have that password, don't go with them, right, but we have the technology now. So I would like a balance between, hey, can I check my messages from my parents and put it away for instructional purposes? That's what I'm looking for.
I don't know what option one, right then?
It'd be
That's the
option one with,
So maybe
with
allowing
some,
them to have it very much,
well, we can also adapt from this, right? We can say, you can't be watching certain things, or you can't have, you can check messages. It only takes a couple of seconds to check messages.
that's really hard to monitor though.
Mhm.
And it's hard for me to say, you were checking a message, but you were on a video. That in itself, we're probably not gonna do that, because that in itself can open up, that could look like we're discriminating, that could look like we're picking on certain kids. I guarantee you, when kids have, and if they, they're having lunch now, it's not a huge issue, but, I can guarantee you some kids are not gonna comply. I mean, it would be really hard. Like, come over for
Right.
lunch, it'd be really hard to monitor. You'd have to be up almost in students' business, you know what I mean?
Then I think I'm more inclined for the option one. Instead of eliminating it totally and saying, hey, you know what, you're blocked until the end of the day.
Here's what I think, and it's Ken, and only Ken says some things. I think there's a correlation between laying on your parents' couch at 30 years old and not being employed. I think the purpose of education is to prepare kids for other education, advancing education, and at some point, to be self-sufficient homeowner, tax-paying, productive citizen of a community. That's what I think education is about. It's not a playtime. And I think the district's current policy encourages people to be responsible, as you would not put someone driving a car at Meadowlark. Tammy had a communication device per her IEP. She refused to use it for everything other than communication. She liked to use sign language, but I think that when we start getting into high school and limiting behaviors completely, it doesn't, I don't think it supports natural maturation and the ability to self-monitor and be productive. So, I'm gonna ask for what the superintendent's recommendation is. And I would say that we should be prepared to have a robust discussion about this. I think it's been on the agenda already, correct?
As long as the
Second
first
read
read.
tonight.
Yes.
No, it's for, this one's a first read,
Is it the first read?
I'm pretty
Oh,
sure.
okay.
I can remember something being up last time.
Yeah, there was student use of
It was
technology.
technology, yeah.
Technology.
So this is something completely different.
Yeah,
I would be ready. I don't know that we need to do a presentation, but I would be ready for some board discussion. If I were the board president, when it comes to this, I'm expecting more and more as these subcommittees roll into the future, that when there are action items, the president, whoever it is that year, would turn and say, do I have a recommendation from the subcommittee? Because that's where the work gets done. And you will find in subcommittee meetings that if staff is bringing stuff that the subcommittee can't support, I don't expect that when the president asks the subcommittee would pretend that, no, everything's wonderful, let's all start over. I think two people saying this isn't ready for prime time should be an indicator at this level that additional work needs to be done before it's put in front. And then at that time, I think the subcommittee would say some of the issues that we discussed and considered with this, and this, put the meaty stuff out there, letting the public know your rights. What's good for kids has been thoroughly discussed and considered. And then at that point, you loop through and do board discussion and some of these controversial policies. We've got newspaper support here, and I love what the newspaper's been doing lately. Everything is just, it is this, and here's the 30,000 foot level of discussion that I think the community needs to hear from the media, so thank you, media, for that, but, so staff recommendation would be what?
But if we're looking for a consistent policy for all schools, particularly secondary, High Desert and Vasquez, there'll be some acclamation for High Desert if we move forward for 25-26 with option number 1, of course. That'll just come with, during unstructured time, be nutrition, lunch, phones are out, additional supervision, reiteration of policy, what the rules are, expectations are, that'll, fall onto High Desert. I say all this to say, so option 1 will go ahead and still restrict cell phone use in the classroom, helps heighten engagement with instruction and learning, while not really constricting our students to 0 cell phone use for the entire instructional day. So I would say option 1, and then High Desert, if that's where the board collectively decides to move, High Desert will just reiterate some revised policy with reinforcement of expectations.
Is it a requirement by the county or the state that all schools?
No.
So if it's not a requirement, we can also develop a policy that, like you said, there's different phases in life that can, be appropriate for a certain age, right?
Yeah, if we're looking for consistency, I would say option 1. If we're looking for, let's say, that gradual progression to, let's say, having that cell phone use from 9 through 12, then we could differentiate between option 1 and 2. It doesn't have to be the same throughout.
So I wouldn't be surprised if someone were to ask during open session discussion what the current policy looks like on a practical level, and then it's described, and what the successes are. And I think that the board has the ability that when things start popping up, to say, I think that we should revisit this and take a look at the more restrictive option as it becomes necessary, is what I would think.
Do we know what some of the other districts around here are doing, or some of the bigger ones?
Well, Los Angeles
No,
Unified,
yes.
what they actually did allow schools to make choices within even how they were going to, whether they were going to do option 1 or 2, and also how, if they were gonna use Yonder, or if they were gonna use Pockets, or they're gonna let kids keep them. They gave sites, because, each site kind of has its own culture, if you will, and so they wanted to, they left that to the sites. So, and I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to having both options, only because I know at High Desert, it does work there. There's not a lot of pushback. I don't know if it's because they come as 5th graders, so it's not already a big deal for 5th and 6th grade. So by the time they get to 7, it's just their practice. But I mean, we've all been there several times. I've never seen a cell phone or even saw a student like push against that. And I imagine there are times, because you've had kids there, where kids they find a way to like text you back, because they do have the option. And kids, they're smart, I'm sure it's not perfect is what I'm saying, but as far as just blatant, or I've never seen one in class. Where in the high school there is more pushback. It comes more from the kids than the parents. And so I do think perhaps giving them some autonomy during lunchtime and helping them learn to self-control is an important skill for them to have. And I think based on what they've been doing, I think they're moving in the right direction with that.
And just recently, we went to visit Vasquez Tuesday. We did some classroom visits. And, at the start of the period, without mentioning classrooms specifically or teachers, some of the teachers in our classrooms had the pockets, the pouches, hung on the wall. And students were just walking in and just dropping them in without even being, directed to, or, having it reiterated. And then some, I didn't see pockets, but students were coming in, I didn't see the cell phones. I know that before it used to be problematic, but they were in their backpacks, my assumption. I didn't see cell phones out and about or even on the desks.
Yeah, we actually really didn't. Usually I see a couple, but we didn't this time, which again tells me kids are becoming more just used to the, not necessarily compliant, but just more respectful of the rule. And again, a lot of it has to do with how our adults in the classroom reinforce that. And so, and I know Dr. Smith at Vasquez has been really, reminding teachers when it was Like if you start to see them, which I had to do that too. But it looks like that's really getting better. So, yeah, that is true. We didn't see any.
And just for the record, for the subcommittee, since it's being recorded, on page 2 of the cell phone policy, we're talking about discipline earlier. And so just kind of going through some of the language, on page 2, there's a section on when, use of mobile communication device is unauthorized. Well, if it's used in an unauthorized manner, student may be disciplined. There's a section on cyberbullying, and then, so you refer to BP 5132, 31.2 for bullying. Students may be subjected to discipline when, mobile communication device, or activity on poses a threat or danger to safety of students or staff, or disrupts school activities. So if there's a student who's, after school hours, even texting and saying, hey, meet me after school, my friends are gonna meet you in the back or whatever for a fight, and then the fight actually doesn't happen, but you are causing a disruption, students are talking and anxiety is caused on the campus, students can be subjected to, or the originator of that text could be subjected to discipline. So it's nice to see where, all of these components of what really kind of transpires on campuses at all districts are still embedded in the language for progressive discipline. I just want to make that notation.
Any more comments? We'll move to future meeting agenda items. I know you mentioned a few
So
great proposals.
I'd like to propose. It's 4 different board those all go together. And the doctor's talking. So that first one I gave you is emergency and disaster preparedness. Here,
That's all right,
you can have mine. The district one that we have in place right now was board approved in 2005. The current one from CSBA is 2024, so that's why I'm proposing that we look at that. This one is bomb threats. And this one is board approved as of 2019. CSBA is 2022. We have earthquake emergency procedures. We had it board approved in 2005. The latest is from 2016 from CSBA. And the last one I am proposing is emergency schedule. This one is from 2025 from CSBA. Ours is not that old, it's from 2023, but there are some changes.
Sorry, I was on my cell phone, addicted to texting.
Some of these are the old ones, right?
I gave the old ones and then the new proposals from CSBA is what I gave.
Okay,
So
okay, so yeah.
this is what I'm proposing that we discuss at the next meeting with your permission, if you're in agreement.
Here's what I would say, anything that involves like a physical feature that involves a policy that has to do with earthquake or evacuation, I would make a quick stop at the Finance and Facilities Committee first.
Oh, okay.
Anything that involves something like you make a bomb threat, you stage something, you cause something, anything that would be involving discipline or the need to bring in legal and anything like that. But I would just make a quick stop at the Facilities and Finance Committee on anything that involves an actual evacuation plan. That would cause them to take a look and open it up and have staff or the facilities director say, yeah, I don't see anything in here that would stop us from being able to comply with this. And then, because I will ask that question when it hits here. I don't know what your schedule looks like with them.
Do you know when the next one is?
Yes, it's the last Tuesday in April, so we have some time to actually plan and get that on the agenda.
Okay,
I want to say April 27th.
okay, so I had listed as for the next Policy and Management Subcommittee meeting, next board meeting, because we only have the one in April, which is April 10th. So you tell me if you want to wait until we go to the Finance and Facilities first. And so we push this out for the first board meeting in May. Before the board meeting, we meet.
That works for me.
Okay.
We can do that.
And also, these are directly related to, school safety,
Right.
which is student
So we
support
need to-
services, which means I have to incorporate all this into a plan. So I don't know if we can just align it all.
Okay.
Cause I would want to read through these, because a lot of times these have changes that require us to make updates.
Correct.
So,
It's always really important to me that the associations aren't being given stuff that they haven't had the opportunity to say, okay, we're gonna ultimately be the ones that have to deal with the change in policy or the enforcement in policy. So I like these meetings, or when I say outside, is that there have been input from the association. I'm not trying to make everything a union issue or something that needs to be negotiated, but I do believe it's good to portray that the employees aren't just having somebody like me up here just going, yeah, that sounds cool, and pushing it down on them. I've never been a fan of that.
what is a communication piece? And we talk about the school safety because each school creates their own safety plan in collaboration with their teams. So that's how, that's how it gets kind of spread at the school site. But if we have to make changes to a comprehensive safety plan, that we have a committee that does that, that also has school site people on it, then they share that. It's kind of how we trickle down.
Right.
Would it be possible to add bullying and sexual harassment? Just say, I'm not sure when we last updated, only because those are cross-referenced in the suspension one that I believe is on the board for vote tonight.
Oh, okay.
I think it's on for second read, so if you go through and read the suspension and expulsion, the regulations, these are cross-referenced. I just want to make sure.
Okay.
And I don't know the dates.
So the idea I had in these subcommittees is that the first year, I think everybody was kind of thinking, okay, well, the education subcommittees were talking about, you know, what's in this book or something like that. I think where our success was you cannot be educated if you do not feel safe. So the facilities went through, looked and said, okay, so we've had some projects come out of that have hit the budget. And I've been fighting any resistance there is to kind of blend everything and make the facility improvement that encourages step one safety to be pulled out in the interest of something else. So I'm happy because it basically says the subcommittee work was, we're gonna tell the education side of the house, we're gonna do everything we can to make sure that your classrooms are safe, your kids are safe, and that you're safe. And then the education subcommittee came in with which I think surprised a lot of people, is how do our hiring practices and how do our staff policies ensure that we got good people that you can trust and they're delivering good material that's appropriate to the students of this district. And I think making that statement was very important. And when it gets up here, if there's something that needs to be twitched to ensure that the work of the other two subcommittees is valid, you got two people here that believe in law abidance, I guarantee you that. So, is there anything else that would cause you to have something to discuss at the meeting you wanted to have in March?
You mean in April?
Yeah. I'm lost.
Well, if you want, because you brought it up that if we want to discuss the bullying and the sexual harassment one.
At the next meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
That would be a good
That'd
one.
be
I
okay.
don't see that there's a reason for the other subcommittees to have to be involved in those two, so that we can, I think that's a good idea.
All right, so I will have those for the April 10th meeting,
Yes.
so that we can discuss those. And then I will take the earthquake one to the finance committee when they meet in April. And
I don't know, I'll read through it and just let you know if there's
if
something.
anything that
Yeah.
needs to
And
go
if
to
we
you.
need to submit it at Ed's, because Ed subcommittee and student support services kind of overlap. They all kind of overlap, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I always like how
Works
the
nicely.
groups work together. Because you share these with me, I have a stack. I think I read all the ones from last time,
Okay.
so.
Anything else?
And if I can make a comment, thank you both for your expertise. Thank you for singling out policies that really have to do with student safety. I think those are quite imminent and time sensitive, so thank you for doing that.
I think the subcommittee system, if it's understood by staff, is not a means for us up here who are neophytes in what it is you do, to be asking questions, be the change agent. I think this is an opportunity to showcase the professionalism of staff in a way that normally wouldn't get done.
With that, thank you so much. And I will adjourn this meeting at 5:42.